Hi.
Good morning.
Is it morning?
No, it's afternoon. It's like in the afternoon. Hi.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Dutch and Dragons. I think this is episode number 3.
Yeah.
In Dutch and Dragons, we pick random questions out of a box. And we answer them.
While we wait to get our Dutch Brothers.
While we wait to get our Dutch Brothers coffee.
Yep.
So today's first question equals...
If you could ban one class from your table, what class would it be and why?
Didn't we already do this one?
I don't think we did.
Oh. Clerics.
Maybe we did.
I'm pretty sure we did.
You think we did?
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure I said clerics before, and it was because they were superfluous.
And then it's still clerics.
And it's still clerics because they're superfluous.
Yeah, and I really don't have one that I would ban. Maybe we did. I don't know. Okay, so let's just go with...
Yeah, see, I feel like you've been putting the questions back in the box.
I may have been putting the questions back in the box.
And this is how you get unscripted.
Okay, so here we go. Playing with individuals that have special needs, how do you reasonably accommodate them? So this one got thrown in there because
I'm gonna let you do this one.
I have cystic fibrosis, so I guess I would be considered a special needs player. But I think that like every player at some point in time is going to needs some sort of special accommodation, and that's just the way that the world works. Everything is going to be hunky dory 100% of the time. So what we're talking about is reasonable accommodation. If you've got a player who is wants to play in your game, but isn't going to be there all of the time because that's just not physically capable, what would you consider to be reasonable to accommodate with them? For some tables, letting them teleprompt, that's not the word I'm looking for.
Play via internet.
Thank you.
Either video or voice chat. There are options. There's also play by post and a whole bunch of other options out there, but
that might work for some tables. That doesn't really work for our table. It gets way too confusing for the players to mix media.
It gets wildly confusing for our remote players when we have a mixed group of either play online and at the table, or when we have somebody trying to play via telephone.
Now, I have joined the game via telephone, but I haven't played the game via telephone. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and I would just go in to listen and hear what was going on, but I didn't necessarily play in those games. I just wanted to listen to them, because they're my friends, and that's fun for me. So, but that's reasonable for some tables. It's unreasonable for other tables. If I have a player that I think is going to be a spotty show, a lot of times I give them characters that are not going to be like make or break characters. So if they want to play a tank, there's another tank there when they're missing. And if you have a player that says, well, I'm going to be spotty in how I show up, but I don't want you playing the main campaign without me, that may not be reasonable for some people. So, I mean, it's really just about sitting down with the person and trying to figure out what is reasonable. And I think having them play characters that don't necessarily break the game if they're missing. Battle plans, which is something we talk about in our first episode, is a great thing to have when you have players missing, because the DM can just follow the battle plans. All of that sort of thing is very helpful. So, honestly, it's just, I never like to exclude those kind of players, but there is a line of, as long as the accommodation isn't hindering everyone else's fun.
And also take into consideration that as adults, everybody needs some accommodation sometimes. And that may mean skipping a game night or doing one shot 1 week instead of playing your main game because somebody's out sick or their kids are sick, or we're all adults, so we all have accommodations that are occasionally necessary.
Of all other things that are happening in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And the game is always supposed to be fun. And that's really the primary rule. So,
okay.
Moving on. Question.
Next question. How important is PC backgrounds in running a game?
That depends. And a caveat to that, if you're running a long-term campaign, PC backgrounds can be a lot more important. Now, when I say PC backgrounds, I don't mean the stuff that you're getting out of the book, that's just the kind of generic background of Acolyte or something like that. What I'm talking about are developed backstory, really. So, for example, a character who is a former, in one of our players' cases actually, a former thief turned monk on the run.
Yep.
So this character, they had a sort of a loose backstory. The player wrote a backstory, and we kind of talked about it a little bit, and there was a lot of our input into how that backstory developed because of the way that they were trying to develop the character. We accommodated that backstory, and we played to that backstory by adding an adventure in whereby this character was able to
go back and face her Mr. Past.
Yeah, it was basically able to go back and interact with a character from their past who had wronged them and who they had to deal with in an effort to move their story forward. And the reward for that was that they shed their rogue levels and became a full-on monk.
Forgiveness is the path to enlightenment.
And that was kind of a way for us to reward the player. Because the rogue monk wasn't really working out super duper well for them anyways.
So we wrote in the character change.
So we wrote in kind of a character change so that they could fully embrace the monk path, but we also did it through story elements, which allowed them to really interact with the world and really dig into what we were selling, basically.
And there are other bloggers who go into this in more depth, but I like it when the PCs have their backstory enough fleshed out that they feel like their character is somebody,
yes,
but not so fleshed out that there is no room for character growth through the gameplay. And there are lots of other people who go into that more in depth, but basically I feel like you should at least know what your character well enough to know its motivations, so that you give your game masters or DMs or whatever you want to call them enough information that they can put those fun personal story hooks into the game.
Right. So it's very important to have enough backstory and enough background to be able to be an individual within the game, and to allow the DM to work your character into the world. So
yeah, so that's important.
Now, in one-shot adventures, it's not as
really
important.
Cares. Yeah, well,
because most of the time those are 2 to 3 sessions, sometimes 4, but there's not. It's not necessary for the player to develop an entire backstory prior to the game session. They can kind of flesh some of that out as you play.
Yeah. But and the thing is I've had a few players who go through what I call short campaigns, and they get attached to the characters. Like, they actually develop the character in the short campaign and take them into long campaigns. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
That's really fun, I think.
Yep. So, next question.
Resurrection, yes or no?
No.
No. We're both anti-resurrection in our games.
Now, reincarnation, yes, because it has some potentially hilarious side effects.
It really does.
But resurrection is a no-go in our game world.
I don't like it because it suspends that it breaks the suspense.
It takes away consequences.
Yeah.
It takes away one very specific consequence in the game, which is death.
Well, and let me put a caveat on that. I have done resurrection, like you're on a quest to resurrect your lost whatever, but it isn't they just pop back up like a daisy after the cleric lays hand on them. Like, it's hard to resurrect. If I do put resurrection in the game, it isn't easy. It's very hard, it's expensive, it's time consuming, and I've only ever had one player that said I would resurrect this character. Like, I would go through the higgledy-piggledy crap that would mean resurrection for them.
We put a lot of effort into avoiding pointless character death. Mm-hmm. Now, that's not to say that if there's a dramatic moment at which a character can sacrifice himself, even if it's not a major story element, that we won't allow them to go forward with that, but we try to prevent pointless character deaths through our own mistakes, which reduces the need for resurrection overall. But we want that the character's death, should the death happen, to actually mean something. And I think that's my big reason for saying no to resurrection, is because it takes the meaning away from it. Now, caveat to that, resurrection does require the participant to be willing.
Yes.
But we just took it out. It just didn't make any sense for it to be in the game for us.
No. So, yeah, there's not resurrection in our game. Not really. Not really.
Right.
Well, and
we are going to burn through questions today, apparently.
The other thing is, there's the other thing that I've had a couple of players who get midway through a campaign or several sessions into a campaign, and they're like, I don't like my character. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. Kill them off. They're not coming back. There's no resurrection.
Excuse me. See, I need coffee.
Oh, see, here's the question. This one we'll talk about for a while. What do you do when your campaign goes tits? I don't think, if you're a DM and you've never had a campaign go tits, then kudos to you, because you're doing some sort of magic that I don't know about.
Well, and what we mean by go tits is get so far off the rails or so far out of whack that it's unsalvageable.
Like, everybody's miserable. You don't want to DM it. Your players don't want to play in it because it's just gone to tits.
My first time game mastering in 5e, and I've been a player for a very long time. I've game mastered off and on over the years through 2nd edition, AD&D, 3.5, a little bit of 4e, but not a whole lot.
Yeah.
And then when 5e came out, I started DMing around the time that Princes of the Apocalypse was published. And I decided to try to run that module, adventure, campaign right out of the gate. Huge mistake. It's absolute, and it was an absolute disaster.
It was awful.
And that's putting it mildly. It was absolutely awful. Everyone was miserable. I was miserable. My players were miserable. And no one was having a good time.
And that's what we mean by it's gone tits. No one's having fun. So
my solution to that was sort of a scrub. What I did is, during the course of one of the portions of the adventure, one of the characters started going mad through the influence of an evil deity, and another deity on the side of good was trying to help prevent this madness from reaching fruition. During that process, a war ensued within the mind of this particular individual, which resulted in a cataclysmic
paradigm shifting
dimension shifting. They shifted planes of existence and into a wholly new and different universe where not everything was the same, but things were made up of things that were the same. So
it got a whole lot more interesting. There was a lot more intrigue, and everybody just had a better time.
And that allowed me to pull everyone away from where they were and bring them around to a new goal. and that goal was find a way to get home.
Yeah.
And then that goal suddenly shifted to find a way to prevent this evil deity from destroying this new world that we've wound up on. And then it turns out that they were home.
It was a lot of fun. That was a good campaign. It's twisty.
How are you?
Good.
Right. That's the caramelizer.
Cool.
It's gonna be $10.70.
Right, because I have to pay you for these. I'm so used to paying. Go.
It's a lot of coffee.
Coffee. There you go, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Anyhow, I would say don't be afraid if no one's having fun to scrub the game. And you can, if you're wanting some closure, you can always, there are always mechanisms within Dungeons and Dragons to push the story forward quickly and just wrap it up and move on to the next thing.
Yeah, you don't want to... Leaving a campaign or an adventure hanging unfinished really, really sucks.
Yeah.
A lot. And I've had it happen more than once, where an adventure has just, for various reasons, fallen on its face. We had one adventure that was running really, really well, that looked like it was going to go to end, but it kept getting stymied because of accommodating people for being out of town, for being sick. A whole bunch of other stuff. So it just ended up being very unsatisfying in the way it ended. But it did have an
ending.
end.
It's just kind of unsatisfying.
It was just kind of unsatisfying. So don't be afraid to end an adventure or a campaign if it's not going well. If everybody's having a bad time, nobody's going to have a good time.
And let me I want to put something else out there. If you as the DM are unhappy with the campaign, like your players are kind of like, okay, well, we sort of get it, we're digging it, but you are struggling with it, I would say that's a good time to reach out if you have other friends who reach out. Reaching out
to other game masters as a sounding board, joining communities of game masters. There are tons of them everywhere. They're on Reddit, they're on Facebook, they're on every social media freaking thing that you could possibly imagine. I'm sure that there's a group out there that will be more than happy to talk to you about your game and the struggles that you're having with it.
Yeah.
I should really remember not to cover my face, but I've got something in my eye. So, I mean, like, you're going to struggle as a game master. It's going to happen. It happens to all of us.
Not every game is going to go flawlessly.
You're going to have off nights. You're going to have nights where you think the game was absolutely just abysmal, and your players are going to have had the best freaking time of their lives, and you're never going to understand why. Feedback is really huge in that. Get feedback from your players. The more feedback you can get from your players, the better everything's going to go all the way around.
And I always tell my players, I always tell my players, like, my goal is not to make anyone miserable. Like, if you guys are not enjoying the story, or if you're not enjoying the game, I don't care how much I'm enjoying it. Like, that, my goal is that you are having fun. And if you are not having fun, you have to tell me, because I can't fix it if you don't tell me.
True
and
story.
I said, I will never get angry if you guys are like, this is dragging. We're not really enjoying this part of the game. Because it informs me for later games. Like, maybe there's a style that you don't particularly like.
So I was doing, and I can point to a recent example of this. I was doing a hex crawl adventure, and the very first night of doing the hex crawl was a slog.
That was awful.
And it was absolutely terrible, and I was relying on a system that somebody else had developed for doing random encounters for the hex crawl, and it just didn't work. No. And I ended up rolling every time I rolled for a random encounter.
We didn't get one.
They got nothing.
We got nothing.
And finally I was like, you know what? This is ridiculous. We are not doing it this way. I'm going to throw an encounter at them. We're going to call it a night right before they actually get to engage in the encounter, and then I'm going to replan this and we're going to move on.
Yeah.
And,
sometimes it doesn't work. And that was, in that game, right before that hex crawl started, one of our players was like, I'm really nervous about this. This is not my favorite style of game.
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, we're going to file that away for later because
Yep.
that's good to know.
And I ended up having to make some adjustments to the hex crawl too, because I had planned it out a certain way, and that was a part of the problem, the way that I had planned it out.
Yep.
It just
I'm
didn't
ringing.
work. Yep, you are.
Check it out. I didn't turn my phone
you're
off for this.
Dingle Dorton
Oh, that's my alarm. Hey guys, it's 1 o'clock
in Arizona.
in Arizona.
But anyhow, so like, don't be afraid to make adjustments, and that's really kind of the key. Is if your game isn't going the way that you think it should, if your players or you just aren't having a good time, talk about it, have a real serious discussion about it, and make adjustments. That's the whole point.
Don't
is to
be
have
too
fun.
rigid.
Yeah, don't be too rigid.
See,
have
I knew
fun.
that question would take up the rest of our time.
Hey, well done. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us for another Dutch and Dragons.
And we'll see you next Sunday. What? Oh, yeah, I totally cut you off on that important stuff. You go.
See this shit? See what I have to put up with? Anyhow, so if you enjoyed the show, please click the link to subscribe below. Click the little bell so that you can get notifications. If you have questions, if there's things you'd like to see us talk about, put them in the comments below. We'll be more than happy to add that to the box of questions. And thank you for joining us.
See you next Sunday.